Women and Work Part 1. When more women work, economies grow. An increase in female labor force participation or a reduction in the gap between women and men's labor force participation results in a faster economic growth. Evidence from a range of countries shows that increasing the share of household income controlled by women, either through their own earnings or cash transfers, changes spending in a way that benefits children and families. Women continue to participate in labor markets on an unequal basis with men. In 2013, the male employment to population ratio stood at 72.2%, while the ratio for females was 47.1%. Women's economic equality is good for business. Companies greatly benefit from increasing leadership opportunities for women, which is shown to increase organizational effectiveness. It is estimated that companies with 3 or more women in senior management functions score higher in all dimensions of organizational effectiveness. Women are essential to agriculture. Women comprise an average of 43% of the agricultural labor force in developing countries, varying considerably across the regions from 20% or less in Latin America to 50% or more in parts of Asia and Africa. Despite the regional and sub-regional variations, women make an essential contribution to agriculture across the developing world. Women farmers control less land than do men, and also have limited access to inputs, seeds, credits, and extension services. Less than 20% of landowners are women. Gender differences in access to land and credit affect the relative ability of female and male farmers and entrepreneurs to invest, operate to scale, and benefit from new economic opportunities. The green economy and sustainable development. From 1990 to 2010, more than 2 billion people gained access to safe drinking water. But still 748 million people are without clean drinking water. Women, especially those in poverty, appear more vulnerable in the face of natural disasters. A recent study of 141 countries found that more women than men die from natural hazards. Where the socioeconomic status of women is high, men and women die in roughly equal numbers during and after a natural disaster, whereas more women than men die when the socioeconomic status of women is low. Women and children are more likely to die than men during disasters. Women and children bear the main negative impact of fuel and water collection and transportation, with women in mainly developing countries spending from 1 to 4 hours a day collecting biomass for fuel. A study of time and water poverty in 25 sub-Saharan African countries estimated that women spend at least 16 million hours a day collecting drinking water. Men spend 6 million hours, and children 4 million hours. Gender gaps in domestic and household work, including time spent obtaining water, fuel, and processing food, are intensified in contexts of economic crisis, environmental degradation, natural disasters, and inadequate infrastructure and services. Women do 2/3 of the world's work, receive 10% of the world's income, and own 1% of the means of production. Women bear disproportionate responsibility for unpaid care work. Women devote 1 to 3 hours more per day to housework than men, 2 to 10 times more the amount of time to care, and 1 to 4 less hours a day to market activities. In the European Union, for example, 25% of women report care and other family and personal responsibilities as the reason for not being in the labor force, versus only 3% of men. This directly and negatively impacts women's participation in the labor force. Gender inequalities in time use are still large and persistent in all countries. When paid and unpaid work are combined, women in developing countries work more than men, with less time for education, leisure, political participation, and self-care. Despite some improvements over the last 50 years, in virtually In virtually every country, men spend more time on leisure each day, while women spend more time doing unpaid housework. Women are more likely than men to work in informal employment. In South Asia, over 80% of women in non-agricultural jobs are in informal employment. In sub-Saharan Africa, 74%, and in Latin America and the Caribbean, 54%. Women in Brazil might laugh at the notion of a double day, for theirs is often a triple or quadruple day, working on their husband's cash crop farm, helping with their parents' land, and maintaining a household and caring for their children. It is only in developed countries where there is the luxury of debating whether women should work out of the home, and is a question relevant mainly to middle and upper class women. Equity and discrimination. We know that women's work tends to be undervalued. Job applications or resumes are most likely to trigger prejudiced evaluations. Women's success may be attributed to luck rather than skills. There are two key terms to understand in regards to discrimination of women in the workplace. The first is the glass ceiling. And just like a glass ceiling, it's an invisible barrier that women can't see, making them think that they can move up in the world, but really there is a place where they can stop, that they are forced to stop. The other is the labyrinth, and it's a complex situation women face when trying to advance in the workplace. The path is unknown, it's uncomplicated, there's not role models, and so when you combine these two, it makes for a very convoluted environment for which women have to navigate rather blindly. More women than men work in vulnerable, low-paid, or undervalued jobs. As of 2013, over 49% of the world's working women were in vulnerable employment, often unprotected by labor legislation, compared to 47% of men. Women were far more likely than men to be in vulnerable employment in East Asia, over 50%, Southeast Asia and the Pacifics, over 63%, South Asia, 81%, North Africa, 58%, and the Middle East. Gender differences in laws affect both developing and developed economies, and women in all regions. Almost 90% of 143 economies studied have at least one legal difference restricting women's economic opportunities. Of those, 79 economies have laws that restrict the types of jobs that women can do, and husbands can object to their wives working and prevent them from accepting jobs in 15 economies. And it doesn't stop there. Many employers are reluctant to pay pregnancy-related benefits or accommodations for women's reproductive roles. The United States is one of a very few countries that make no provisions for paid maternity leave. In the United States, more than 60% of women with young children are in the labor force, and only 27 countries provide paid paternity leave, of which the U.S. provides none. The U.S. remains one of only 2 countries, other than Papua New Guinea, that do not make any government provisions for paid maternity leave for female workers. As Joanna Coles said on NPR in 2014, for a woman, she has a child, it is the single most important economic decision she'll ever make in her life. It continues with discrimination based on sexual orientation, which is legal in most workplaces in the United States. While Obama banned federal contractors from discriminating against employees on the basis of sexual orientation, that did not stop it from happening completely. We should note that such discrimination is illegal in Canada. Studies show in the United States that lesbian and bisexual women earn between 13 and 32% less than heterosexual women. It should be noticed that decreases in LGBTQ discrimination are not universal, and there are still many places that criminalize homosexuality. And when we look at institutes of higher education, it continues. Across all types of higher education institutions, female full professors at doctoral institutions earn 87.2% of their male counterpart's salary. As you can see, it has not changed from the 1980s. And it doesn't stop there. In addition to being paid less, students treat their female professors differently from their male professors. They are much more likely to expect more, to harass them more, and to get angry and decrease their evaluations when they are not perceived as a stereotypical nice woman. While female faculty face one form of discrimination, women's working conditions around the world are difficult and dangerous. For example, there's a risk of serious injury that is greater for a nursing aide than for a coal miner or a steel mill worker. Factory work can involve long hours, uncomfortable conditions, and high pressure to produce quickly, and are most often female populated. Young women are often sought after as workers because they are stereotyped as docile and nimble-fingered and will work for little pay. In developing countries, young women make up the lowest paid segment of the industrial workforce. Overlay that with sexual harassment. In the United States, there are two types. The first is quid pro quo harassment, where an individual is pressured to submit to unwelcome sexual advances or other unwelcome sexual contact as a condition of employment, promotion, or raise. What will you do for me to let you keep your job? What will you do for me so that you can get a raise? The hostile environment is the second type, and that is making unwelcome sexual advances or engaging in other contact of sexual nature that is unreasonable and interferes with a person's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. This could be from touching to fondling to making inappropriate sexualized jokes. And still, all around the world, this occurs, but its incidents are difficult to ascertain, and many cases go unreported. Concluding this segment, it's important again to note that globally, the availability of childcare and provisions for parental leave are associated with greater workforce participation by mothers. Countries that are more egalitarian offer these more, and it's the best practices of companies and countries with good economies. Unfortunately, most women are left on their own when it comes to finding a job-family-work balance, and it increases stress for them. Sharing household tasks is associated with a lower level of role strain for women. There are job working conditions, and despite all of these strains and stresses, combining employment and family roles can be good for women, particularly if they have support from families and friends.